feels like Miami down here. Welcome to this Thursday morning, and we have some humidity in Illinois for the first time in a while. It feels like Florida.
Well, we don't have any because I live in the desert in Arizona, so we don't even understand what humidity means.
No,
so,
I've always wondered that, Ann. Is a dry heat still a heat? Because I've never been...
Oh, hell yes. I mean, last summer... We had, 53 or 56 days over 110.
That's right.
And 115 was more normal. We treat it like you treat winter. We don't go out. We don't go out in it. You know, the people that are out in the summer here are tourists because we just run to our cars. And when you put your seatbelt on, you get like second-degree burns.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, it's really, now we get used to it, we do, but it's like, I know in Illinois, I'm guessing you have darkness and cold and gray and yeah, so you get used to it. So,
and that's just summer. No, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Well, this is really cool. Last year, Ann, you were on and we had a really great conversation. And now this time around, we're talking Your Forgotten Sons. This is a really, really cool book. And just the story on how this came together. Take it away, Senator. The floor is yours. How did this come about?
Yeah, all of my books so far to date have been about Arizona, places in Arizona, locations and different stories. But this was very different. A dear friend who I've known for 40 years, I met her when I worked for my first TV station in Columbus, Georgia. She called me and she said, I need you to come to Johns Hopkins Hospital because I have to have surgery. And I might be paralyzed from the waist down. Now, why did she call me? Her husband is a soldier who did 3 tours, Afghanistan, Iraq, and he cannot be in hospitals. There was a very bad situation where his men were dying in a hospital in Iraq, I think. And so he couldn't handle it. So she said, come be my healthcare power of attorney. I said, of course. So I flew to Baltimore. And the night before the surgery, she hands me this Ziploc bag of old letters. And she said, no matter what happens to me, I want you to promise that you will tell Bud's story. And because I wanted to make her feel better, I went, okay, of course, right. I'll do anything, right? And the bottom line is she had a tumor wrapped around her spine and they removed it and she walked out of the hospital, but I had made a promise.
Yep.
So Sergeant Bud Richardville was her uncle. Her mother was one of those people who had babies like 20 years apart.
Oh, okay.
He's actually her direct uncle, even though she's in her 60s, you know, so her mother was pretty old when she had her. And so she grew up with these pictures of this soldier on the wall at home that never came home from World War II. And turns out he worked when they inducted him, they put him in the Graves Registration Service. Do you know what that is?
I do not, actually.
It's part of the quartermasters, and the quartermasters are, of course, people that supply everything. Without them, there's no war. Mm-hmm. But the Graves Registration Service are the guys that locate, identify, and bury the dead.
Oh, wow.
Now, think about that job.
Yeah.
Think about it. Now, I was unable to get any of Bud's military records because in 1973, the military personnel records depository in St. Louis burned to the ground. 80% of all their records from, I think, 1912 to 1960 were destroyed. Mm-hmm. Bud's among them. So I had no physical records. So I'm like, how am I supposed to find out what happened to this man and where he was when I have no military records? Well, I started going by the dates on postmarks on the letters that she gave me. Some of these letters were to his mother. Some were to his wife, brand new wife. He just met a week before he left. Some were to his sister. And I had to follow where he was. By following those postmarks, I sensed he'd been in Normandy when he landed in Normandy. He was at the Battle of the Bulge. He was with Patton's Third Army in Czechoslovakia when they were trying to take that country back from the Nazis. So I followed those. I wasn't sure until after the book went to press. I got a copy of his obituary that ran in a newspaper in Vincennes, Indiana, which is where he was from. And it proved that I was right.
Wow.
That he had been in all these places. And so his job, along with the men he served with, he hit the beaches at Normandy. Well, guess what? There are thousands of dead.
Yep.
And not just bodies, but pieces of bodies. And I will tell you now that this book is necessarily gruesome. It really is horrible. If you've ever seen the first 24 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, Not Saving Private Ryan. Yeah, Saving Private Ryan.
Yep.
Where they hit the beach. It's like that. But now the camera pans away and their bodies are everywhere. Now they've got to be collected. They've got to be identified. We've got to do something with them. Not only because of the disease factor, but because you've got more men coming through there, and it's the morale factor. It's the idea that, what do you do when you got 18-year-old soldiers who are hitting the beaches going, crap, there are thousands of dead people here. So the graves registration guys had to immediately go in, and they dug temporary graves near the beach, and then they had to move them later and build cemeteries. And today there are, in 36 different countries, there are American cemeteries that were built by the Graves Registration Service. So that was Bud's job.
I couldn't.
And
I just couldn't, because we had the chance, I did, to go to Normandy or go into France and see all the flags there that are lined up in that memorial, and or not flags, the poppy flowers that are all down. It's so beautiful in France. But I couldn't imagine that, Anne. I mean, you're going and removing a fallen soldier that, like you said, it could be bits of somebody that's just,
a foot. And if you were at Normandy, Bud helped to build that cemetery, and the one in Luxembourg, and the one in Epinal. I mean, all of them were built by this Graves Registration Service. So you take he was a happy-go-lucky guy. He was a little bit of a womanizer. The women loved him. He was handsome and charming, and he had very little education. But he went to work he was a logger. So he went to work in the paper mills in Michigan, which were an essential military business.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't get drafted till he was 29. So because he the military needed paper.
Makes sense. It makes total sense when you say that. Yep, because you can't.
My dad worked for Westinghouse. He didn't get drafted till a little later either, because he was working. It was an industry that was needed by the military. So by the time Bud was drafted, he was 29 years old, which made him like a different generation from the 17 and 18-year-olds that were in his unit. So you've got these young boys, and they get thrown on the beaches, and they say, pick up all the parts, find the pieces, and identify them. Now, how do you do? Some of them, maybe they had a tattoo or a religious medal or a label in their clothing, but this is what these guys did every day.
Well, and did it, Anne, while there's fighting going on. I mean,
they were right behind the troops. And when one of Bud's letters, these guys were embarrassed to admit what they were doing. Many of them wanted out, and they couldn't get out. And they said, look, someone has to do this job. And the military said, this is your job. Go do it. And it was very difficult. They didn't tell their family members. Bud didn't tell his family members what he was doing, except for his brother-in-law, who was Regina's father.
Okay.
So he said, yes, I'm in the Graves unit. And one letter said, I'm not embarrassed. We're doing an important job. We even got an accommodation, which we figured was from the Battle of the Bulge. They're right there. The bullets are still flying in some cases.
Yeah.
And even worse than being in the battles are the situations where they have to go back a long time later. And how did honestly, there've been no movies, no books. When we talk about war, we see planes fall from the sky, we see guys shoot each other, and then the camera moves on and the carnage remains. So we never see that part.
Right.
It was very hard for me to find any research on this until I found a book called Crosses in the Wind. And it was written by a man who was in the Graves Registration Service, a man who became a Lieutenant Colonel Shulman. And he wrote 2 years after the war what that was like, and wrote specific instances where these men worked. And I took some of his descriptions and gave them to Bud, because quite honestly, this is a book inspired. It's inspired by a true story.
Right.
Based on a true story would mean that everything is true. Every conversation is true. Every character is true. But I couldn't do that. I didn't know who his friends were. I didn't know exactly where he was. So I took Shulman's information and I put Bud in some of those situations. And the most harrowing one was a couple of weeks after Normandy. They sent these guys back to the beach. And you know what a Higgins boat is? It's the boat that drops down and all the guys run. Yeah. One of those boats had been hit with a shell and it flipped, and there were men in it. Now this is like a couple weeks later, and they're underwater.
Oh no.
They're under. Now we're talking no scuba tanks, no nothing. These guys, they said, okay, go down and get the bodies. Go down in the water they've been down there a while, and bring up what's left. And that's what they did.
Well, and who knows, I mean, I hate to sound morbid, but after a couple of weeks of floating in water, I mean, your body's already breaking down, and who knows what's there to, I mean, no telling what's going to happen when you go in that water.
Right. And the men had to be very careful because there was metal, there could be unexploded ordnance, that kind of thing. But they couldn't say, no, we're not going to do it.
Right. Well,
and so they had to go in, and that was one of the most harrowing things. And then on top of that, they had to liberate the death camp. And once the death camps were liberated, somebody had to clean it up. These were the guys. You could see in his letters how he disintegrated over this time.
Yeah. And that's what, I mean, to me, there's no more crucial job, because the way you described it, I mean, you're right. You have to be there to bury those individuals, those fallen soldiers, because just the morale thing alone, you're storming the beaches and you're seeing bodies just piling up. I mean, you aren't running in the foxhole anymore. You're thinking it's over, and not just that, but I mean, just the fact that for him to look at a soldier in the face knowing there's a good chance that I'm going to be picking you up without you looking back at me is really powerful. Yeah. I mean, really.
The sad thing, well, there were a lot of sad things, clearly, but it wasn't just Allied soldiers. They had to pick up everybody. So they often, they had to get all the German soldiers too.
Wow.
You can't have any bodies because there can be disease happens. And again, the morale issue. So it was a horrible job. And there was one scene that broke my heart, and it was where the men in the graves registration units had trucks full of bodies that they were moving to a cemetery, and there were a group of American soldiers marching down the road that they were on. And when the soldiers saw them, they turned their backs on them. They just turned and wouldn't look at them, like they weren't doing an important job. And what I've learned is that these guys have never gotten any recognition. No one ever said good for you or patted them on the back. And I think it's heartbreaking, because you cannot tell me that these men who came home didn't come home with deep invisible wounds that no one ever allowed them to talk about.
Well, and I couldn't imagine holding that role, and I just couldn't, because I'd be somebody that immediately, the moment I have to, start doing that process, I think about everyone's relatives and all of those really, it's really important conversations on, man, what about his mom? What about his dad? Did he have kids? I couldn't do that job mentally today.
They would have made you.
Exactly.
They would have made you do it. And the thing is, some of the, Bud, because he was older, he was made a sergeant before he went to war, even though he came in as just a regular guy. Mm-hmm. Because he was older, the young kids kind of would go to him and he would help them. He was a good guy. Go ahead.
Sorry for cutting. Was there any correlation or any type of thoughts in his letters about, being an older guy around some of the younger men? Were there any generational, gaps or any, writings on, man, these guys are wild, or what are they saying,
They were not allowed to talk about other soldiers or where they were. But the other thing is that he was an uneducated man. His letters were pretty basic for the most part. Mm-hmm. And they were the guys were also told, don't tell your family bad things. Don't tell them what they're doing. He never even told his mother or his wife what he did. Because how do you explain that? Now think about it. You're supposed to go to war and take that hill and be a hero, and he's over there picking up bodies. So they very often didn't mention it. And I only saw him mention it once to his brother-in-law.
Well, I mean, my heart breaks for that, though, because they're as much a part of the fight than anybody. And, and they had to show more compassion too, and more human-like qualities, because you're fighting your enemy and you're trying to get bodies cleared out and you're trying to do your job. And here's a Nazi soldier that's in front of you. And instead of doing what a lot of, I'm sure, grunt soldiers would want to do and, light him up or whatever, you're treating him with dignity to make sure that soldier is being buried somewhere and being accounted for. And that, to me, is you have to be a certain human to be able to really do those things.
Well, I think, to me, it's probably the most difficult job in the military.
100%.
And where do we go today when we honor people that fought in World War II, World War I? They've always been these people.
Yeah.
we go to the cemeteries that they built. And you've been to them. I've been to them. They are graceful and beautiful and peaceful. Where we had killing fields are now beautiful places of remembrance that they built.
I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that aspect of it.
Nobody does. Every time I say it, they go, I never thought about where the bodies went. Well, today, of course, we still have, it's called mortuary affairs today. Since Vietnam, they've called it mortuary affairs. But we do not bury them on foreign soil anymore. We fly them home. But we didn't have that ability in World War II. There were also so many people dying so quickly that they buried them there. Now, some people got their family members back. They had a choice. But the military said, sign this paper and we're leaving them wherever they are. So we were hoping to bring Bud home. He's buried in Epinal, France, buried by the men he worked with. And but the military owns him now, so we will probably never get to do that.
Well, and that's a whole nother aspect that I've never even thought of, too, is, I'm sure there's so many millions of Americans that want their loved one back home with them rather than over on foreign soil. And that's
families signed those papers. And
did they?
Look. Oh, yeah. Okay. What they'd say is your family member died. They've been buried here because we're in the middle of a war. They couldn't, we didn't have the capacity to ship all these bodies home at that point. We were in the middle of a war for 4 years.
Right.
So today we can put them on a plane and they'll be back here in your home in 24 hours. But it wasn't like that then. So they told the families at the end of the war, they said, here, we can leave them where they are in these cemeteries we built. If you'd like them to come home, fine. But if not, we'll give you a paycheck. Here's some money. And many families took the money.
Oh, I didn't.
Now, I'm not criticizing.
No,
that at all.
yeah, totally.
That was the case.
But I'm learning though. I always love chatting with you. Even last year I was learning stuff. And it's funny. Someone texts me. They go, CJ, why do you always seem excited whenever you kind of you don't know where to go with something. I go, hell, I'm learning with everybody else too. And that's what life's about, is to learn about those things. And really, it helps me understand better about your book. And now, as you're writing this, did you have any conversations with your friend on some of the discoveries you found? What was that like, from start to finish? I got to hear that story.
Regina, who I call Reg, grew up in the military. Her dad fought in 3 wars. And she's lived by a Fort Benning her whole life, or a lot of her life. So she's very military oriented, and she's helped me immensely with research and to tell Bud's story. And she also, the family had many oral histories about Bud, and she relayed them to me. For example, that he married this woman like a couple of weeks before he went to war. Nobody knew who she was, and she was very mysterious, and she remains very mysterious. Lorraine was an odd woman. Have you ever heard of the allotment Annies?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so allotment Annies are women who married multiple soldiers at the same time to get a paycheck. Back in those days, they got $20 a week, which today is like $360 a week. And if the soldier or sailor airman died, they got a $10,000 paycheck.
Right.
That's like $175,000 today. So there were women who married multiple soldiers or sailors. And in fact, the military knew all about this. They had movie reels that they showed the soldiers saying, please do not marry someone you don't know. Please, because these guys are naive. They're 17, 18-year-old kids that came off farms. And they were very easily manipulated. And one woman was married to 6 sailors at the same time.
Were they on the same boat?
No. The only reason they found out was because these 2 sailors are next to each other in a bar in Australia, and they're going, hey, here's my wife. Here's a picture. And the other guy goes, here's my wife. Wait a minute. It's this woman. And they caught her, and she was one of the few women ever prosecuted for it. She was put in prison for a little bit. But the idea is, now I know that sounds horrible that women would do that, but women had never worked much outside of the home before. They suddenly could be Rosie the Riveter or work for the war effort, but they knew when the men came home, they were back to nothing.
Yeah.
So, and there weren't any high-paying jobs or good-paying jobs for women. So I can sort of understand how a desperate woman might have done this, but Bud's wife was so cruel. And the letters, when the family told me stories about her, because I have no letters from her, the letters in the book I fabricated because I understood what had happened. And I don't want to give too much of it away. Bottom line is she broke his heart. In the meantime, there were quiet family whispers that he had fallen in love with another woman while he was at war.
Oh.
And he was Catholic. He was married. He was very conflicted about these things, and so I don't have all the facts. Again, this is inspired by a true story, but along with the horrors of war, there's a love story in there.
Well, I'm telling you, and I'm excited to get my hands on a copy of this. I mean, whenever you sent me the first email, I went, oh, man, we got to talk about it. And now, here we are, less than a month away from when it hits the online shelves. Is it going to be in bookstores? Where can we find a copy?
You can buy it anywhere. It's on all of the online book sales. You can go to Barnes and Noble. It might not be it wouldn't be on the shelf, but they would get it for you.
Oh, absolutely.
If people go to my website, which is Anne Montgomery writer.com. There's all links to it everywhere.
And we'll make sure to link everything in a write-up that we do, Anne, because this is what a great story. Just the story on writing the book itself is amazing. And then the story you're telling is just really fascinating, and something that really does need to be given more of a look into is the soldiers, just like Bud, that are going through and being, what's the actual term? What were they called?
Graves registration.
Grave registration. Oh, to me, so many around here, Anne, are going to love learning about that, because I have no idea until you started talking really about their role, what that was.
I think that by nature, we shut that part off.
Yep.
We go, oh, great, cool battle, air battle, planes fall down. But we don't go, hey, where are the pilots that went down?
Yeah.
Where are the guys in the ships? I interviewed a number of World War II veterans when I was a print reporter for a Memorial Day story. My editor said, go out and do a Memorial Day story. Where are all the parties? Where are all the sports? I said, that's not what Memorial Day is.
No.
Memorial Day is about remembering those who didn't come home. And he looked at me, goes, write whatever you want. So I went to the local VFW and I interviewed some men who'd been in World War II. And I mentioned that because one of them, I asked, what do you remember? What do you remember about men who didn't come home? And he said, I was in a helicopter and they were lowering me down into the water to get some bodies, but there were sharks everywhere and they were eating the bodies. And he said, they pulled me back up and would not allow me to go down there. That whole idea isn't what bothered him. It bothered him that they didn't know if it was one or two bodies, and that men could never be declared dead because he couldn't retrieve them.
Oh, man.
So that's, he wanted to do his job, but they wouldn't let him. He couldn't get down there. And so no one ever got any peace of mind about what had happened to their loved one or loved ones. I think it's natural for us to turn away from that part. The other problem with this, though, is not just us wanting to ignore the dead. It's us ignoring the mental health situations of our military.
100%.
Today, every news show, every day is talking about dealing with your mental health and talk about it, and we accept it, but not in the military.
Yeah.
If you have issues, and there are a lot of them that do, they are afraid to mention it, that it will ruin their careers. And guess what? They're right. Yep. It should not be like this now. I watched Bud disintegrate through his letters. I watched it. Now, I know how many men came home with deep, invisible wounds that no one wanted to hear about. Yeah, I mean, you probably remember the time in Patton's movie where he slapped the guy who was in the hospital bed suffering from shell shock. Mm-hmm. Slapped him and called him a yellow-bellied coward because his brain went. Now, today we know better, but the military doesn't want to talk about that. It's considered weakness, and in the military, all we see is big, strong, tough people, and they've got to fix it because every day in this country, 20 veterans / service people are committing suicide. And we need to do better. The military needs to do better to figure out a way to help these people.
100%, Ann. And I can't speak highly enough on that. I used to do a veteran show when I was on the AM dial over in St. Louis, and all it was about how the VA is getting better. But one thing they never tackled was mental health in these veterans and these folks that are going into the military, and maybe some on-hand counseling services and different tools that those soldiers can lead and learn as they're going through their tenure. And then, of course, the resources afterwards. It's just not there. It's just not.
And the military has proven it can tackle a problem.
Yep.
I mean, I think leading up to World War I, 80% of the wounded died. And they died, infection, all kinds of things. Today, 80% live.
Right.
That are severely wounded. They live because we figured out how to set up MASH units. We figured out how to, get people home and get people well and do their surgeries. So bottom line is they need to tackle this. They really do. They
100%, and so many of us in this area will be echoing those thoughts going forward. And hopefully more of a national conversation can be had on that very important topic too. Anne Montgomery, Your Forgotten Sons comes out what day?
June 6th.
That's okay.
The 80th anniversary of D-Day.
100%. And we'll link it on RiverBender.com on the on-demand interview and on our write-up that we're going to do on this. So that way you guys can just click on the link and you're good to go. And thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you for having me, CJ. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Before we take a quick break, and this was not on purpose, one of our biggest supporters now of the show is Centerstone, which Centerstone is a national leader in mental health and substance use disorder treatment for people of all ages. And folks, if at home, if you're looking for a fresh start on the road to recovery, a life free from addiction is possible, and it starts at Centerstone. Centerstone is a national leader in mental health and substance use disorder treatment, but their clinicians use evidence-based treatment programs in all of their practices. So it means, Ann, that they're getting something that's developed for them, not one of those tried for 10 years and maybe it worked for some, maybe it didn't work. This is developed for you at home that are going through this journey. There's so many unknowns on that road to recovery, but one thing you can know for sure is that Centerstone will be a constant guiding force for you on your recovery journey. You can go to recoverwithus.org, that's recoverwithus.org, or call 1-877-HOPE-123 to learn more today. Anne Montgomery, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, CJ. That was perfect.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll take a quick break here in our daily show. We'll roll right around the corner, right after.